Hello and welcome to the DweltOggy Show, the only show on Blunt Lemons named after a specific member, showing I truly am the most narcissistic lemon of them all. Last week we looked at 4 Harry Potter games linked to the first 4 Harry Potter movies, in honour of the release of Fantastic Beasts and where to find them, and it was a thoroughly pleasant time. Mostly. So here's a link. Go watch it. I'll wait. Okay, now that you're done, we're here this week to talk about the final games of the series. There's no movie release this week. I just needed to get this done as I have more than 4 Harry Potter games worth of footage to use. With the gap between the 4th and 5th movies, a whole new generation of video game consoles were introduced, which also meant our Harry Potter games had to evolve with them. And that means glorious 16:9 resolutions! Better graphics, though Harry still looks like a weird wax model most of the time. But it also means that the values of modern gaming started to seep into what these games wanted to be, mostly to the detriment of the series. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Deathly Hallows. So without further ado, let's start looking at these games. So let's start with the most obvious point about these games, that they are firmly movie tie-in games with them in a much larger way than the previous games in the series. The music, the castle, even the actors' faces are directly taken from the movies. For the first 2 games we're looking at, Order of the Phoenix and the Half-Blood Prince for Xbox 360, this turns out to be a good thing. For a fan of the movies, running around a fully realised Hogwarts fills me with a childlike wonder. The castle in these games is based on the map of Hogwarts used for creating the movies, and it shows. That is the Transfiguration Courtyard. That is the Great Hall. That is the Trophy Room. In these games, such obvious care is taken to create the recognisable hallways of Hogwarts that I can't help but enjoy exploring and traversing this world. Many of the actors from the movies also lend their voices to the games as well.
I thought you'd be safe around muggles.
While not all of them do, the ones who do obviously put the effort and care into their performance to make it good.
Mum gave us all things to do. They're about somewhere.
A lot of criticism is thrown at movie tie-in games, with good reason, they're generally shared, but Order of the Phoenix and Half-Blood Prince go the extra mile to make games that, while not amazing, craft a Harry Potter experience that is both fun and true to the movies. The last 2 Harry Potter games, Deathly Hallows Part 1 and Part 2 for the Xbox 360, are the exact opposite of this, and movie tie-ins in an absolute worst way. But we'll get to them later. With the game's renewed effort to be closer to the source material, they made more effort than ever to capture what the actors look like in the movies. In the case of Ron, it works pretty well.
Maybe they'll fall in love with you. Hermione, I love you.
The character models are based on the look of the actor, and they are mostly successful. Come on, it was 2008, give them a break, it was never going to be 100% there. Combined with the actor's voice, it lends a feeling of authenticity. This is also true of the Weasley twins as well. But this approach isn't without its notable failures as well. Ginny, for example, varies from game to game on how she looks, so it never quite lines up with how she looks in the movie. In Order of the Phoenix, she has a very prominent chin that makes it look like she contracted mumps or something. In Half-Blood Prince, she has a look of permanent surprise, like someone just farted. Side note, the character is voiced by the actors from the films and seems to do a much better job here than there.
Go on, Harry. Show them how it's done. You put on a good enough show. I'll make McLaggen eat his broom.
Maybe it's just because she had a lot more to do plot-wise in the games, or maybe she is just a better voice actor. At least those games keep a semblance of what the actress looks like. By the time you get to Deathly Hallows Part 2, she doesn't even slightly resemble the actress.
Not my daughter!
Hermione doesn't fare much better as the games go on either. In Order of the Phoenix, they managed to get fairly close to Emma Watson. Side note, Order of the Phoenix has these DVD extras you can unlock by exploring. I was too lazy to keep checking on them, but the one I did watch had Emma Watson talking about how much the games had pushed realism and how she respects them. Well, not enough to lend her voice acting talents anyway. Half-Blood Prince Hermione doesn't resemble her movie counterpart much at all though. I think it's the massive forehead. Harry fares somewhat better, but still never quite managed to look like his movie counterpart. I don't know, there's something off about the way he looks in both games. Also, the voice actor seems just a little too posh.
I've been doing nothing. You've had all the fun here at the headquarters of the Order.
On a different note, in Order of the Phoenix and Half-Blood Prince, all the character models had this stiffness to them. In Order, they also seemed quite stooped at all times. This adds to the awkwardness of the cutscenes, but also lends its own charm somehow. Surprisingly, this improves by the Deathly Hallows games, where effort seems to have been put into the animations and cinematics. The only thing that seems to have had any effort put into it. Also, Voldemort has the veiniest head of any video game character ever. I mean, seriously, that is one veiny head. The open world of Order of the Phoenix and Half-Blood Prince is by far the most well-realised version of the school in any of the games. In both instances, the schools are chock full of secret passageways and things to discover and do.
Yummy.
Also, there are no dangerous creatures roaming the grounds, and there's definitely no dangerous plants. Well, there's just this weird weed that blocks some areas, and needs to be burnt away, but more on that later. Also, unlike the Hogwarts of past games, the school is bursting with students and life. This is in stark contrast to the empty grounds of past games. This time, they also go for a Hogwarts full of believable activities and areas to explore. Gone are the days of redcaps wandering the grounds in school. Now we have to contend with schoolboys who haven't gone to detention.
McGonagall told Harry here to find some snotty-nosed first years who were cheeky enough not to turn up to her detention. She said if you didn't go, then Harry could feed you all to the dragon that lives in the kitchens.
There's not really a dragon in the kitchens, is there?
Want to find out? Then hop it.
Broken clocks. Slytherins closing the door we wanted to go through.
What? Have the Aurors decided to close this again?
Oh dear. How are you going to get to your Gryffindor trials?
You shut this?
Yeah. See you, losers.
How are we going to get to Quidditch now?
And, most heinous, nay, most dangerous of all, catching an owl to send at post.
But I forgot to put the address on it, and now the owl's flown up there and won't come down.
I'll get it for you.
So yeah, not the hair-raising adventures of past games, but the mundane tasks are somehow more fun than the over-the-top dungeons of the first 3 games, and infinitely better than the rubbish action game that Goblet of Fire was. I really enjoyed doing these tasks, and it felt like what being at Hogwarts would really be like. Who knew that going to school would be fun? For the first time, Hogwarts feels like a real school. The students even wear a uniform. There are no lessons where I have to kill giant cauldron monsters. In fact, lessons are done by example and repetition, exactly how I would imagine learning spells would have to be done. This extends to the well-realised potion-making sections of Half-Blood Prince as well. A process that should have been boring turns out to be one of the most engaging parts of the game. In this mode, Harry has to create potions by mixing various ingredients. Unlike real chemistry, this turns out to be extremely engaging. I'm looking at you, Mr. Frank. Even while I'm typing this, it fills me with a strange sense of joy at the idea of being in Hogwarts and learning spells. I think something's wrong with me. Help me. Both of these games pack Hogwarts full of activities. Everything from teacher side quests to dueling club, this is the fullest Hogwarts of any of the games so far, in that it has any side activities at all. The games are also full of secret locations and areas to find. Finding these offers rewards as well, giving meaning to the exploration. Anyway, despite these activities being way less dangerous than the activities of past games, Harry's always willing to risk life and limb, scaling Hogwarts fulfilled tasks for his fellow DA members. I mean, seriously, it's only a camera. The scaling of the castle seems wholly unnecessary. However, Hogwarts is still not without its dangers, and now has a brand new problem to contend with. By the beginning of Order of the Phoenix, Hogwarts for some reason has fallen into an incredible state of disrepair and neglect. Portraits have been pulled off the walls, statues destroyed, entire sections of the castle have collapsed, roofs have been caved in, and who is the repair of Hogwarts left to? Well, it's Harry and his friends, of course. The school is a straight-up health hazard, and I'm not sure what happened. Did Voldemort launch a vandalism campaign? Looking at this game's Voldemort and his inclination to throw chairs, it's entirely possible. Or maybe Peeves decided to have some fun. Either way, it seems like Filch hasn't been doing his job this year. It's not only parts of the school which are falling to bits, but large magical plants have taken residence in parts of the school as well. These require multiple students to burn them away, with the Incendio spell. I'm with Umbridge on this one. This school has sliding standards, and they're full-on health hazard. I fully support her wizarding Ofsted. Make Hogwarts great again. When it comes to spellcasting, the Harry Potter games have never really been very involved. Spells were usually equipped to a button and the player would have to lock onto a target and press the button to cast that spell. It wasn't exactly engaging. By the time we get to Order of the Phoenix, efforts were made to make spellcasting a much more involved process by using the right stick to simulate the movement of a wand. Now to cast a spell, the player has to remember the movement associated with it and perform it to do the spell. Circle the stick for Reparo, double tap forward on the stick for Depulso, etc, etc. The game also has quite the extensive list of spells for both combat and peaceful use. Learning these spells actually took some time, but made me feel like I had learned how to do them by the end of the game. The combat spells, on the other hand, I never really got the hang of. I could pull off a decent Stupefy, but could not for the life of me remember how to do any of the other spells in the heat of battle. It didn't help that I was playing on the hardest difficulty either. Battles devolved into a confusing mass of spells, especially as most battles were with more than one person. Harry would spend most of the time knocked to the floor, and then eventually his friends would win the battle. The exceptions to this were the fights at the end of the game when you play Sirius and Dumbledore. As it was a one-on-one duel and I didn't have friends to help me, I actually had to rely on my own dueling skill to win. The results were somewhat similar, but at least eventually I was able to win by casting spells at the enemy. In the Dumbledore fight, though, I just cast Protego again and again and again. Eventually Voldemort was defeated by his own rebounding spells. By the Half-Blood Prince, they had clearly decided that combat needed refining. They lowered the amount of spells and made the way in which they were cast much simpler. Stupefy is now just a tap forward with a stick, for example. Expelliarmus is just hold both sticks left for half a second. This vastly improved the dueling process and made it much more fun. That said, Harry has the accuracy of a stormtrooper most of the time.
Stupefy!
By the time we get to the Deathly Hallows games, modern gaming had its way with the combat system. There's not really spells for non-combat things, and they had turned into third-person shooters. But more on that in a second. Yeah, so this game takes the form of a third-person shooter, a really bad third-person shooter. Right, all spells are bound to the right trigger. There's no automatic spells here, you just have to pound that trigger as fast as you can. There's a somewhat wide range of spells that the players avail of them. They're all useless. Seriously, every one of them has no significant advantage over Stupefy. In fact, they all fire slower and seem to do the same thing. Oh, actually, apart from Confringo, which appears to be some sort of grenade spell. That kills in one shot, but takes so long to fire it's next to useless. This combat is so bad and repetitive, I'm surprised I didn't develop a repetitive strain injury in my right trigger finger. Then there's Protego, that just roots you to the spot and you can't attack and can't move. Useless. And there's just so many enemies. There are achievements for killing hundreds of them. They just don't stop coming. Also, I'm fairly sure that 50% of the enemies are just homeless people. Harry turns up at this old power station and just starts indiscriminately killing dozens of them. I know they're meant to be snatchers, but they look like homeless people, and I don't think Harry ever stops to check. Death Eaters and the homeless aren't the only enemies, though. No, there's giant spiders too, which apparently have formed an alliance with the homeless people. Oh, and there's Dementors as well. Apparently Dementors can be killed now, by the way. Just blast them in the face with this shitty-looking Patronus spell several times, and they'll disappear. Another enemy present are the Inferi. They can't be killed. To be honest, I'm not sure how to deal with them. I just ran or glitched them. The combat is so bad and there's so much of it, by the middle of the game I decided it wasn't even worth it, and just made runs for it. Occasionally I would turn back and use Protego to regenerate my health. Eventually, though, this strategy evolved into always using the invisibility cloak. This allowed me to skip whole combat scenarios, but not these things. No, Whomping Willows are everywhere. They can see through invisibility cloaks, apparently. I hate them. Last time we talked about Goblet of Fire's action gameplay, and how it's exactly the opposite of what a Harry Potter game should be. This is the same, but so much worse. It flat out ignores what the book's movie set out. For example, instead of hiding, Harry seeks out Death Eaters by setting out to rescue Muggleborns. Why? I couldn't tell you. At certain points in the game, the game just stops. And the other characters say they are doing research or reading a book. And then that's when Harry plays Vigilante to rescue some Muggleborns. These missions are the worst examples of what a Harry Potter game could be. They just flat out ignore the point of the story. Also, how and why Harry would ever go back to the Ministry or sneak into Godric's Hollow is beyond me. It's a stupid excuse to pad out the playtime and reuse assets and maps from earlier in the game. These missions fall into one of three categories. Rescue the Muggleborns, protect a group of Muggleborns, and hold out until the Death Eaters give up trying to kill you. None of them make sense, and all of them are boring and tedious. In this one, I hid in a corner, and the inept eye just couldn't find me. I was hoping the mission would just end and it was timer-based or something. Turns out it wasn't. I had to kill all of them. In this one, Harry for some reason goes to a cave full of dragons. Don't know why. There seems to be no point. There's also just random potions lying on the floor to protect you from the fire. There's also like one homeless man that you have to kill. Then when Harry gets to the end of the mission, it just ends. There wasn't even anyone to rescue. Did anyone making this game care about what they were doing? This game is a movie tie-in at their worst. There was no care made to make it fun or engaging, or create a worthwhile time. It was just there because it had to be. At least it was mercifully short once I figured out I could skip 80% of the content with the invisibility cloak. Last note, why start this game with this chase sequence? It's dull, boring, showcases the game at its worst, it's graphically shit. Why? Who would ever think to begin their game like this? Jesus Christ, this game's bad. This I intend to be a shorter section, as I feel that 2 sections on the individual games is a bit much. Also, I went on a mega rant last section. However, I've got to talk about this game, which is also renowned for being terrible. Well, it's not that bad. Don't get me wrong, it's really not good. Unlike its predecessor, it did away with the Muggle-born missions. Plus, it has a selection of spells that have actual uses. An actual automatic spell. Goodbye repetitive stress injuries. Enemies seem to take less hits to go down, making combat much more fun to take part in. No more Whomping Willows or Doxies. It is way more over the top than Part 1 as well, leaning more into being a game with action set pieces. It's also really short. This game still misses the mark, but it's infinitely better than Part 1. Maybe it's because I went straight from Part 1 to Part 2 in a massive marathon of Harry Potter games that the differences become so apparent to me. But this really was a welcome change compared to Part 1. Still bad, but refreshingly not 100% shit. While the main problem with the Deathly Hallows titles is their obvious poor quality and ill-conceived gameplay choices, they both try to make a third-person action game out of Harry Potter. They boil down epic moments and nuance of the stories down to hordes of faceless Death Eaters and homeless people. Part 2 attempts to go some way to adding action set pieces to the fray as well. While seeing Professor McGonagall face off against a giant, while somewhat amusing, is very much against what the series ultimately is. It's flashy and has little substance. The multiple boss fights against Voldemort and other key characters also highlight this flaw. While they have a certain comic charm, they also don't work. These characters and scenarios do not work like this. The books and movies clearly set how these spells and how these characters would act, and these games fly directly in the face of what Harry Potter is. Voldemort wouldn't act like this. Why is this spell an assault rifle? None of this makes sense for what a fan might want out of a Harry Potter game. Harry Potter's not an action hero. It's not the type of franchise where the characters would mow down hundreds of faceless bad guys and then throw out a one-liner.
Gryffindor! You will not set foot in Hogwarts!
In some ways I respect Part 2 for going more whole hog than its somewhat drab predecessor, but it still so horrifically misses the mark. Order of the Phoenix and Half-Blood Prince have their problems. Neither manages to nail everything they try, although I do really like both. They do manage, however, to nail the atmosphere and experience of being a student at Hogwarts. The Deathly Hallow games threw all of this out in favour of modern action game gibberish. Why make a third-person shooter out of Harry Potter? It doesn't make sense. That just does not suit the character or the story. And they're really bad at it as well. So we've come to the end of our journey. In the end, I'm glad I did these videos. Harry Potter games range through the whole spectrum, from the truly awful to the really good. The Hogwarts experience was perfected by Order of the Phoenix and Half-Blood Prince, and I'm very glad I got to play those games. It's very clear that modern gaming sentiments affected these games as the series went on. The need to create a brown third-person shooter eventually overrode the need to create an authentic Hogwarts experience. However, none of this matters. They're all ancient games and none of you are going to play them. What really does matter is the scheduling for this show. From this point on, there'll be a DweltOggy Show every 2 weeks, so which means next week's off. In the week between episodes, this day, Thursday every week, we'll have a one-off solo Blunt Lemons Let's Play made by me. Maybe in the future, if I build a backlog, I'll be able to do this show weekly, but for now, every 2 weeks will have to do. So I'll see you in 2 weeks, where we'll be looking at a certain gaming icon who turned 20 this year. In the meantime, enjoy this montage of bosses reacting to being hurt by a spell.